Okay, welcome Katie and Jason and Professor Oscar and Daniel in the Twitter space. If if Katie, if you can unmute your mic and say anything that comes to mind. Uh-oh. I cannot hear Katie. Oh, I know why, because the speaker's not on. Hold on. Here we go. There we go. All right, let's try that again.
Testing 1, 2
There we
in
go.
Twitter Spaces.
You got it.
Testing 1, 2.
Right on time. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Cheryl, and everybody. And Cheryl, if you could hot foot it over to the Twitter space so I can make you a co-host over there. And we are starting 30 minutes early. You're not crazy. We are indeed starting 30 minutes early, which people on the Pacific West Coast might not. They're not. They're not even awake yet. They're going to jump in here in about 30 minutes, and that's cool. But for the rest of the world, and especially people like me and Cheryl in Asia, this is a welcome change, I think. So,
I'm in the space.
yes, okay, great, thank you. So, invite the co-host sent. So, anyway, we're going to try this time zone for a bit, and I need it because I need to go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier, yada yada. And well, it's going to take a minute for the regular tech newsers to get the memo that we're starting 30 minutes earlier. So that's okay. It's all good. So for today, I figure while we're waiting for our regular friends to join us, 30 minutes from now, maybe somebody has, we can dive a little deeper and really encourage people to share headlines that they feel are valuable before we get into the big top headlines. Maybe we'll wait 30 minutes before we get into the big top 10 headlines.
Yeah, not a good one, but it's a news nevertheless. Africa has another coup, so
Oh, where?
still it Burkina Faso. So the military coup happened, and it's just it really breaks my heart. I know that Africa that is not blessed with a lot of amazing leaders, but military coup is not the answer. I just it's especially like the end of last year we had what I think what was that Sudan, the military coup, and then we have another one. I think Lavina, you can help me out. I remember there was another one, and then this is the third one, and it's just a series of like coups. So in 2021 and now 2022. So anyway, it happened. So yeah, they got rid of the president, and the military is taking over the TV and stuff. They announced that they took control and stuff like that. And in fact, I was looking at it, having coffee this morning. CNN was showing that. I don't know why people are celebrating. I guess sometimes when they are not happy with the leader, but I don't think military coup is an answer. But anyway, that's the hot news here.
Okay, thank you for that. That's from Messi in Clubhouse. Anyone in Twitter space want to share a headline that they've seen? We're going to wait until the 30-minute mark, which is 27 minutes from now, before we go into the top 10. But I got to say, looking at the top 10, it's unusually good today. There's an unusually good list of articles that I'm eager to jump into. We might not be able to wait 27 minutes, depending on what.
Let's go, Tyler. Let's go.
We should just do it anyways to teach them.
Actually, do you know that meme? Do you know that meme with the two Kermits? The one that's like the nice Kermit, and then the other one that's the not nice Kermit. So
No.
the good Kermit's saying like wait for everyone else, and like the bad Kermit's like,
Oh yeah,
just go ahead.
let's do it. Yeah.
My COVID Kermit was the dancing. I mean, I was trying to imitate actually the Kermit dancing, especially when COVID was going crazy in the US. I was in the US, stuck there. So New York was like going crazy, and I thought, oh, okay, this is apocalypse and we all gonna die. So I was just learning the Kermit dancing. So that's always in my head when you talk about Kermit.
All right. Well, I got my finger itching on the air horn.
Just do it,
Just do it. We
Tyler.
go.
Just do it.
Fuck it. We're doing it, everybody. Here we go.
Woohoo! Good morning.
Good morning, Mabon.
Rebel.
Mabon is back. Tomoko and Aram and some of the regulars already getting the hint. They heard the air horn. Somehow they knew. They heard it. So,
Can I say congratulations to Cami and Tina for their 1 year anniversary? Woohoo!
Ooh.
Thank you.
Happy
Oh, we
one
have two, Cami and Tina.
anniversary.
Happy clubhouse anniversary.
all right. So, the top story today, Tuesday, January 25th, is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that NVIDIA is planning to, well, before I say what they're planning, last we heard, NVIDIA was going to acquire ARM. Remember this in the UK, and then there was going to be a whole bunch of scrutiny over, if that would give NVIDIA too much of an advantage in the chip space. And you remember that? That's where we left it. And it was going to be one of the biggest.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of the biggest acquisitions in recent tech history. And so Bloomberg sources are now saying that NVIDIA is planning to abandon the ARM acquisition. As regulators scrutinize the deal, source says that the sources that for Bloomberg's sources are saying that SoftBank, who owns ARM, you remember, if you really remember the details, SoftBank is preparing an IPO for ARM, the sources say. NVIDIA quietly preparing to abandon its purchase of ARM from SoftBank after making little to no progress in winning approvals, just a little too much scrutiny. I gotta say, I'm not terribly surprised because this was going to be a real slog and a real difficult acquisition because when it comes to these semiconductors, these countries are not messing around. They perceive these semiconductor, fabs and companies that this whole space is becoming national security issues, and that's not hyperbole. That's how. I mean, I'm trying to think of other than nuclear weapons. These semiconductors is kind of right below how you would rank countries. You have it's kind of well known. There's countries that have and don't have nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan have it. Israel has it. America has it. Right? The regular suspects. And then I feel like second to that, semiconductors is another incredibly powerful thing that countries either have or don't have, and the ones who have it, boy, is that a super advantage that they have it. Is there another product or commodity that rivals semiconductors? I think is an interesting question to ask, and I think to me the obvious answer is no, but I would love to be challenged on that. So, if anyone have a thought on anything that rivals the importance of semiconductors, short of knowing how to enrich uranium and making nuclear bombs? No, everyone's silent. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. We used to regulate large prime numbers, like exporting numbers, and now actually there's a lot of regulation on GPUs. So it wasn't surprising to me, at least, that ARM, like the sale of ARM, because of how prolific that architecture has become, the reduced architecture of ARM, even though it's not the reduced instruction set like RISC, it still represents an interesting optimization. If we look at the latest generation of Intel chips, they combine high performance and efficiency cores, and they actually do much better than the previous generation with this new configuration, even though the core count for the high performance cores is lower. So there's something to be said about the movement towards ARM. So that means that ARM may in fact become as ubiquitous as x86 did, but this time around it's moving from smartphones to the desktop and laptop. And as we saw with the MacBook, the ARM architecture, which is what Apple borrowed for the M1 processor and the M1X and the M1 Pro, is actually a really compelling argument going forward for mobile computing. So it's not surprising that happened. Unfortunate for Jensen Huang. I guess he'll have to, hope to be fashionable with his leather jacket without ARM this time around. But it was an exciting idea that ARM is moving towards becoming more commonplace, especially as everyone was building up the background software support and all that stuff. So, just a few comments there from me, but thanks.
Okay. So should we go into the second article?
I have a question, Tyler.
Okay.
In this article, it's mentioned that now that ARM is going for public acquisition, would that mean that NVIDIA, they can still have a deal through public acquisition. It doesn't have to be the way they were before when NVIDIA and SoftBank were going to be one company.
Yeah.
But now it's like they are approaching it differently just to avoid the regulation from the EU and probably Chinese regulator. But they can still develop this kind of relationship by another route. To me, it looks like rerouting instead of just a complete abolishment of the future cooperation.
Yep. So the next topic is that Google is shuttering FLoC, FLOC, a federation of cohorts. It's controversial replacement of cookies. And then there's some new thing that Google's up to called Topics, which organizes browsing into more than 300 topics. So the Federated Learning of Cohorts, FLOC, Google's controversial project for replacing cookies for interest-based advertising by instead grouping users into groups of users with comparable interests. Known as FLoC, they're now scrapping it. And this is a follow-up from yesterday, was it not? Do you remember 24 hours ago, we read the headline that German publishers led by Axel Springer were telling the EU that, hey, that is violates EU laws, what Google's doing here. Google's hoarding. They used to use cookies. We built our business models on those cookies, and now Google's removing the cookies and hoarding all the data for themselves. Remember that headline yesterday, 24 hours ago? You do, because you're smart like that. You have short-term memory. That's great. Well, Google is now killing, and that was a huge problem. That would have been a huge problem for Google, right? Google did not want to feel that heat or that smoke because Axel Springer, as I said yesterday when we read the headline, is nobody to be trifled with. That is an incredibly powerful company politically inside of Germany. Germany's incredibly powerful and influential inside the EU. You see where this is going, do you not? How Google would be really putting themselves in a pickle if they're pissing off German publishers like this. And so 24 hours after that, you gotta admire the turnaround time on this, the pivot time. It says, the Federated Learning of Cohorts, Google's controversial project for replacing cookies by instead grouping users into groups of users with comparable interests is dead. In its place, Google today announced a new proposal called Topics. The idea here is that your browser will learn about your interests as you move around the web. It'll keep data for the last 3 weeks of your browsing history, and as of now, Google is restricting the number of topics to 300, with plans to extend over time. Google notes that these topics will not include any sensitive categories like gender or race. By the way, those two things specifically were just, do you remember the headline 24 hours ago where the EU said that the whole data tracking can no longer include anything to do with gender or race or sexuality, I think was the words. We have to find the article from yesterday. Was age another one? You're not, minors as well are not allowed to be tracked for targeted advertising. This is a whole new EU data policy that you can't track people that are minors. You can't track user-specific demographic data related to gender or sexuality or religion. Remember that 24 hours ago? You do. You remember that also, right? Separate headline. And both of those headlines are now reappearing in this headline today because Google's in one fell swoop addressing both of those articles yesterday that were both kind of aimed right at them. One was they were about to get the living poo-poo beat out of them for stopping the cookies and building this new thing called Flock. And they were also going to get, a yin-yang up the wazoo for not for this whole this new regulation that's directly related to their business model around demographic targeting or what did we call it, direct targeting or something. So this whole new model called Topics, it says to figure out your interests, Google categorizes the sites you visit based on one of 300 topics. For sites that it hasn't categorized before, a lightweight machine learning algorithm in the browser will take over and provide an estimated topic based on the name of domains. Oh, this is getting very interesting. I've never heard anything about this. This is brand effing new. They're basically organizing the entire web into about 300 buckets. And then they're going to track which buckets you're dipping your toes and feet into, which builds a bit of a profile about you. The question is, will they be sharing that sweet, juicy data of you and which buckets and topics you dabble in with anyone else? I imagine not. And that's going to piss off publishers around the world who have built their business model on cookies and being able to do this. And Google's walking a really interesting tightrope legally to comply and not get themselves in hot water. And this seems to be their latest maneuver to navigate that minefield. So when it says, when you hit upon a site that supports the Topics API for ad purposes, the browser will share 3 topics you are interested in, one for each of the 3 last weeks, selected randomly from your top 5 topics of each week. The website that you're visiting can then share this with its advertisers. So they are sharing, but very selectively. They're not sharing all of they're not sharing your web browsing history at all. They don't actually know which sites you went to. They just know that you like, whatever, XYZ or ABC out of the dozens of websites, out of the dozens of topics that you follow. They're only going to share 3 based on recent data. You feel where this is going? So this is an interesting sort of compromise strategy of Google giving just enough info to the publishers so that they don't end up homeless and bankrupt. And so they can't say that Google's not sharing. So we're giving you a little bit, but barely enough. I think it's fair to say that's what's happening. Cheryl, by the way, you in Twitter Space, you need to unrequest the mic so I can make you a co-host, by the way. So anyway, select the site. The website can then share this with the advertising partners to decide which ads to show you. So your ads are going to be roughly relevant to the buckets that you like to dabble in. Ideally, this would make for a more private method of deciding which ad to show you. And Google notes that it also provides users with far greater control and transparency than what's currently the standard. Users will be able to review and remove topics from their lists. Oh, snap. So now the user, that's you and me, will be able to edit and moderate what lists or buckets we are seen to be dabbling in that are then by extension shared in some limited capacity with websites we visit. Eric.
I wonder if this is actually just a data analysis approach that they went with that showed that this new system is actually probably statistically equivalent to what they were doing before, It reminds me a little bit of the work done by Raytheon a few years ago, where they used just public social network data of the last 24 hours, and they were able to predict to a 95% confidence interval where you would be physically within the next 24 hours. So these kinds of, magic by statistics approaches, I'd be curious what some of the German researchers, for example, because I think Germany has a very rich community of hacker culture and reverse engineering. I wonder if any of their analyses will show that this is actually still not sufficient to ensure the kind of privacy that the EU is trying to mandate.
So it says, quote, the design of topics was informed by our learnings from the earlier Flock trials. Google's privacy sandbox lead Ben Galbraith said in a press briefing ahead of today's announcement, quote, and this resulted in a bunch of great feedback from the community, as I'm sure you know. As such, topics replaces our Flock proposal, and I want to emphasize that this whole process of sharing a proposal, doing a trial, gathering feedback, and then iterating on the designs, this is the whole open development process that we wanted for the sandbox and really shows the process working as intended. Galbraith noted that Google has spoken to a number of parties to gather feedback for its new proposal, but today marks the start of the company's process of collaborating with the ecosystem. It'll remain to be seen if other browser vendors will be interested in adding the Topics API, since they all quickly turned a cold shoulder to Flock. I'm somewhat skeptical that they will want to adopt the Topics API, but it'll be interesting to watch how the ecosystem reacts. It's also worth noting that for advertisers, Topics is only one potential signal to decide which ad to show to a given user. In some ways, it just becomes another signal for them that can be augmented with data about the article a user is currently reading, for example, or other contextual data about the user. The plan is to start trialing the Topics API at the end of the quarter, but to get the ball rolling, Google also today published a technical explainer that delves a bit deeper into the details of the proposal. And then it gives a photo. There's an illustration, kind of like a patent illustration. These little stick figure, and it says your interests, auto and vehicles, and it has a little X box. This is the user interface that you and me and every user will be able to edit, and Google will be transparent with you about which topics or which they're calling your interests. So in this example, they give 5. It says autos and vehicles, books and literature, comics and animation, rock music, and team sports. And there's little X's next to each of those, so you can say, no, I'm not interested in rock music. Ostensibly, it doesn't say it, but you could add, I'm interested in jazz music. And by the way, at that point, we're now at what I've been saying the advertising world should have been doing 15 years ago. I've been wondering out loud long before tech news, for decades, saying, why isn't there a internet advertising model where anyone asks the users, hey, what kind of ads do you want to see? Because I can tell you right now, I'm interested in paddle boards, but even Google apparently doesn't know that, because I'm not seeing ads for paddle boards, but I would like to. I would like to see ads for comfortable shorts. I'm not seeing any ads for comfortable shorts, but I'm telling you right now, I'm in the market for such a thing. And I'm also in the market for some kind of new, kind of sandal. These are actual things that are in my mind that I know I want to buy in the next few days. And yeah, I'm not seeing any ads for any of that. And if people were sending me ads, by golly, they have a very good chance of getting my money, but nobody's taking the time to even bother to ask me. So I'm very.
I wonder if later today you'll get ads for that, since you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. You just start talking to your friends about what the kind of ads you want to see. Yeah, that would be awesome. A new innovation is, we all sort of start to figure out that we can curate our own ads just by telling our friends, hey, you know what ad I'd really like to see? And then let's see.
Well, Tyler, we did that experiment actually. 5 of our friends did that in a room where we mentioned the brands or products that we wanted to see, and they were not visible on our Instagram or YouTube advertisement feed. And 3 days later, when we had that conversation, we each started showing those brands specifically on our Instagram feed. So there was a 3 days delay, and that conversation happened on Clubhouse. And all of us got those different brands, which are never seen before on our ad feeds. So something is there. You may see the ads in coming days.
Okay. So the third topic, number 3, here we go, is that Twitter's code, inside the code, shows that Twitter is developing something called Flock. Not to be confused with the last article of Google Flock, F-L-O-C. This is F-L-O-C-K, Twitter Flock, which is a pun on the whole concept of birds. And you know how Twitter, it's a tweet, it's the sound of a bird. You got birds, you got flocks, you got all bird. You know, Twitter is kind of going above and beyond with all of their the whole family of metaphors around birds. Anyway, so they're developing something called Flock, F-L-O-C-K, which lets Twitter users create tweets for up to 150 close friends. Get it? Flock, you got it? You and your friend, you're a bunch of birds. You and your friends, you could think of yourselves as a flock, right? So after teasing the feature in July 2021, which no doubt our friend Jane Wong from Hong Kong was the source of that discovery, as she always is with Twitter future product development, Twitter's developing a feature called Flock that will allow users to create a list of people to send certain tweets out to, reminiscent of Instagram's close friends feature. The feature was first tweeted or teased by Twitter last July, along with other experimental features like the ability to downvote tweets. Dear God, please bring that back. Can we please have the downvote button on the tweets? Reverse engineering whiz Alessandro Paluzzi discovered code in the Twitter app confirming the feature is very much still in the development pipeline. At the time, the feature was known as Trusted Friends, but the name has since shifted to Flock. Gee, I wonder why. According to code found by Paluzzi, much like Instagram's close friends, Flock will allow users to add followers to a list and later send out tweets exclusively to those people. Right now, Twitter is playing around with a list cap of 150 people. Plenty of people to send your nudes out to in less public fashion. Some details. The Twitter has yet to confirm any details about the Flock feature except for July's tease. At that point, we got a quick look at the user interface. And indeed, when you tweet, it'll now ask you choose audience. It's a little pop-up at the bottom of your screen. It's a little pull-down menu at the top start of your tweet. And you can choose the audience. You can send it to everyone or your flock of trusted friends, essentially. So there you go. You now have a way to be a little more intimate with and segmentation within your followers in Twitter. That's kind of cool because ostensibly you could make, well, there was another incredibly cool feature that was teased 6 months ago with Twitter, which was the idea that you would have different profiles, right? Where you would have your work profile on Twitter. You could think of them as different accounts, but they're not. They're all one account tied to one email address, but they're different facets. I think that was the word they used. Facets of your social media personality. So you have your work persona, you have your outside of work persona with your close friends, and then you have your church persona. And then every time you tweet, it says, oh, which persona are you tweeting from now? Is this your work persona or your intimate friends persona or what have you? That would be another way to do it. And you have different followers for each of those personas, essentially. They're almost like separate accounts, but they're all tied to one email address. And that helps solve the really crazy problem of people creating lots of different email addresses to create different accounts and all that nonsense, which they shouldn't need to do because then Twitter gets confused. Is this one person or three different people? And what's the nature of all of this? And you're like, no, it's one person. I just happen to have multiple personality disorder. And I happen to be like most people have, a different sort of image professionally and personally. And I don't want to mingle those two because I'm kind of rude and obscene personally. And, I deal with a whole lot of Fortune 500 companies. So I am forced to have a sort of sterile, boring kind of personality when I deal with my partners. I think we can all relate to that, yeah?
I just comment that I think it's a commendable and a great end user experience roadmap feature, but isn't it also commendable that they're going to hurt their user growth numbers or their unique identifiers by limiting, multiple accounts getting created?
Well, now we know why they're not doing it. I think you just solved the mystery as to why that feature never came out. So there you go. Twitter Flock is coming soon, apparently. We'll see. Time will tell. Next up, number 4. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, unveils something called AI Research Supercluster, a supercomputer for machine learning training. And this is, one of the things that we want, which is machine learning training takes time and cycles. It takes time to train it on a computer. And well, what if you could train it on a supercomputer? You could train it much, much, much faster. And these things, never, unlike humans who ostensibly run out of the ability to learn more, these computer models don't. That's what's so scary about them, is we're still in this relative infancy of AIs, where the AIs that we have today are sort of barely beyond the embryonic stage of development. But as it takes a human, 30 to 50 to 70 years to develop, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what have you, so too will these AIs take decades they will continue to improve forever, way longer than a human lifespan, and honestly, much faster than humans do. Although humans do learn quite quickly in the first 5 to 10 years of life. Well, algorithms on a percentage basis do too. But it's going to be amazing to see as we start to use faster and faster computers, specifically supercomputers, and holy shit, when we get to quantum computers training machine learning models, then you really got to watch the fuck out, because now you're talking about 10,000 years of computer power behind machine learning and AIs. And that's where people get very nervous about the whole idea that we could create, the thing could become sentient overnight on a quantum computer without, while we sleep, and we don't know it. Next thing you know, it decides, well, we're the enemy, and heaven forbid it decides that humans are the enemy, if it ever gets that idea. So then we're all toast. But Meta unveils their AI research supercluster, a supercomputer for machine learning training, claiming it will have 16,000 GPUs and be the world's fastest upon completion in mid-2020. Well, somewhat relative to that headline is Tesla's, somebody help me who's a Tesla geek. If Ben's with us, he'll no doubt. Dojo, thank you. So Tesla as well is taking a similar approach with training their their machine learning vision system for their fully autonomous vehicles, right? They're a test pilot, as they call it. And that thing needs training to learn what the hell is every object driving in front of the car on the cameras. How does it move? What is it? What is that object? Is it a balloon? Is it a UFO? I need to know so I can predict how it's going to move in the next fraction of a second and adjust the car in real time accordingly. And the big claim and the huge gamble, and my goodness, it's a very contentious issue within the AI machine learning space, is this Tesla's autonomous system and the mountain of code behind it. Can they really do this with nothing but actual cameras and train these cameras to work like human eyes and understand the objects on the road and behave accordingly? And Alon's gamble in big part is based on the supercomputing power to make that happen in our lifetime. Because if you were trying to do that on your phone, it would take several lifetimes to train those models. But if you have Dojo, this endlessly scalable supercomputer system, then he might be right. It's this speed issue of training that we're talking about. You need a massive, crazy supercomputer like the biggest in the world, which he was claiming it would be because of the architecture. It's endlessly scalable. Well, here comes Facebook in this headline today that this new thing called the supercluster has 16,000 GPUs. And the question is it like Dojo endlessly scalable? That's an interesting architectural question and I imagine it is. Anyway, we don't need to go into the nitty-gritty detail. I think everyone gets the idea of the power of these supercomputers with these machine learning things. And again, why there's a bit of excitement around why quantum computers is so interesting. It's not because it's going to, yes, it will have encryption issues to some extent, but that's not at all the most interesting or concerning aspect of quantum computers. So The article number 5, are we ready for that? Number 5 is that the Ethereum Foundation renames ETH1 as execution layer and ETH2 as consensus layer to, quote, save all future users from navigating this confusing mental model. Ethereum is a protocol undergoing significant changes. Client teams are upgrading the protocol and they're trying to simplify things. Maybe May or other crypto folks might have a comment or a thought or a nuance, a little additional essence that they might want to add into this one. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think we're at the stage in the crypto landscape development where there's the understanding and the somewhat tacit agreement that we need to start simplifying to onboard and remove the cognitive complexity friction, which we all agree is there because your grandparents aren't using crypto yet. And the big part of the reason they're not is because of this cognitive complexity friction. And we need to get to, we've got all of the people who, can understand are using it at this point. And if we want to expand the audience, which we should do, that is the name of the game. By the way, that is precisely why Jack have decided to allocate significant resources to simplifying, and he more than anyone understands the power of simplicity, and really wants to simplify Bitcoin specifically and embed it into Twitter, one of his biggest resources. And because once you get mainstream adoption, there's an interesting thing that happens. People who touch Bitcoin and at any point get even a tiny bit of it into any kind of wallet that they have now are, forgive the metaphor, this is a metaphor I'm about to use, they become infected with the virus and it spreads. That's how it spreads, is people have it, they're willing to then pass it around and share it around, and once they've become in actual contact with it and have any of it, it's a very binary thing. You either hold some amount of Bitcoin or you do not. And once you do, you have a different relationship with it psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what have you. And generally, once you have it, you somewhat are more favorable about it. And Jack, I think, realizes that fundamentally, and that's why he's on a mission to, with a very clever strategy, to get many, many, many more people to have a wallet that contains it and to receive it. And I think he has a brilliant strategy for doing exactly that. And because once you've got a majority of people that have it, right, then you're in a really interesting position. And that's, by the way, why China's banning it, because they don't want people to have it. And this is why now in the recent days, in the past 48 hours, Russia's ostensibly banning it now, even though they previously were perceived to be very favorable of it. My take is they were favorable about it. They're favorable about everyone else using it, especially the West, because they would love nothing more than to see the world get off the dollar, and the Bitcoin's probably the best likely scenario for that to happen from their perspective. So they're in some weird way conflicted and favorable of Bitcoin as long as it poses a threat to the US dollar. But as soon internally, China doesn't want that. They want their own central bank digital currency. So does Russia. So does every country. It's going to turn out that every country in the end is going to want to have what China has. China's in a unique position, and Russia is, in a slightly less, to a less extent, able to force their will on their people, unquestionably. So they can force this central bank digital currency, and they have, and the citizens have no recourse or say in the matter. The problem is when you come to the US, we do have a say in the matter. That is one of the biggest differences between the US and China, where if the US were to ban Bitcoin, you would have a whole bunch of people instantaneously rise up and say, oh, hell no, brah. And whenever the next election comes around, we're going to make that a primary issue, along with climate change and abortion and gun rights and everything else. And the more people that you have who are holding Bitcoin, the more people that you're going to have that are going to vote with their crypto wallets, no pun intended. So that's where you see the kind of sinister genius of wanting to get broad adoption. And the key is, again, simplicity. That's one of the friction points of getting more people to trust it, so to speak.
Yeah, Tyler, it's also what, in addition to what you're talking about, the quote viral, it's the network effect, right? So the more people have it, the more people will use it, and the more users there are for it. So that's what everything, that's the uptick, the stickiness they need. So as you're describing as viral, it's a network effect. The more people have it, it's like the phone. The phone doesn't work if there's only two people that have it, or a platform doesn't work if there's only two people that have it. If you need more and more people that have it, they'll create more and more use cases. And yes, as you said, it's definitely destabilizing, and that's why those guys want it all over here to destabilize the dollar.
Okay, next up is from Variety, which it's interesting to see how much Variety is getting in our top 10 on.
Wait. Tyler, I wanted to speak to what you just changed, the E2, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was looking for in the article. This came out, the Ethereum blog, right? Came out January 24th, but there was something else that came out before they moved on to this blog. And I read it in one of the crypto rooms because a lot of people didn't know what was going on. They came out. Polygon runs on the Ethereum network, right? And then their layer 2 has their own algorithms on top of it, right? So they had changed a lot of stuff with the Ethereum, the proof of staking, and making sure that not too many people stake so that there be more free flowing on value on the exchange. If everybody staked their money, like for instance, hid it in a mattress in their house, then there will be no way for secondary markets, soft product markets like banks and financial institutions that are they can't leverage your money to loan it out. So they created an algorithm on the Matic highway that was like a predictive multidimensional analysis on best and worst case scenarios on whether the movement that you're moving your coin, the probability that you would stake it literally. And that was around, I think, January 17th when Polygon came out with that. So you have a proof of work for this ETH2, and then it's saying proof of stake. And the problem is that now that they're coming out with 2.0 to show, hey, they're past this one phase and they're going to another phase, people are thinking that ETH2 is a whole different coin and that there's all these different scams coming out now because people think that they're like ETH2 is different from ETH1 and they're trying to sell people fake like ETH2 quote unquote tokens. So this blog doesn't even tell you much about what's really going on and how they created something called the beacon chain. So Binance BNB, they have their Binance chain where you're allowed to see all the transactions, right? Then Polygon came out and said, hey, we're creating this EIP. Let me make sure I have the numbers right. It was EIP 15.
1559.
Yes, 1559. And I posted it a couple days ago. Nobody knew about it. I posted it right when it came out. And
I
for
knew
people to
about
see.
it. Hey, Lisa.
You were asleep, Amy.
I know I must have been, but I knew about it. But keep
But
on
Amy,
going.
you were asleep. I'm trying to tell you, when I came out on Clubhouse, nobody on Clubhouse knew what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah, I
So
think the main thing with Ethereum 2 and Ethereum 1 is one is a consensus layer, which is Ethereum 2, and they're both the same token. They're just a different, they just have new improvements on it. And Polygon Matic actually is an EVM compatible exchange, which
no, but
means
look, Amy, look at what he posted in the blog. Look where it
which
says
blog in
Ethereum's.
ethereum.org, the one above? Ethereum
Yes.
Foundation?
If you Yes, just you guys just roadmap what I'm talking about. There's a part right to close to the bottom of the page that says, how does the update change the Ethereum roadmap? If you scroll down, there is where it says proof of work, and then it says proof of stake. August 4th, 2021, it says London and EIP 1559. Same shit. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. Like, a lot of people think that some of these tokens are very different, but if you go through and look at each token and where they're at, they snitch on each other. Like, it's the same shit. So this EIP 1559, they're very top level with it when you're reading the article. But there's one part on the EIP 1559 article. It says, for a more technical overview of how EIP 1559 is being implemented, click here. When you click there, they're basically saying, like, you'd have to be like a real techie to understand what the hell's going on. They're using like fuzzy logic type of equation and multi-dimensional predictive analysis, like I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah. Actually, you know what,
inside of
Lisa?
it.
You know, Lisa, there's an interesting document which I'm going to find and post on Twitter for those in the audience that are really geeky, like Lisa and I, who like to go down the rabbit holes, especially my friends in the audience that are super, super good with crazy high level math. Okay, because ING, the Bank of Holland, one of the banks in Holland, did a very extensive yeah, definitely need to have your eyes open and wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you may have to read it 5 times over if your math is not sharp, because they did a whole mega analysis financially of Ethereum,
Hold
and
on.
they made their
May
own banking sort of financial analysis of how Ethereum could work and how it would be set up to work. There's so many algorithms in there, it would make your head spin.
Hey,
But
May.
it is very extensive. For whoever wants to read it, whoever wants to go down that rabbit hole, it's about 20 pages. But it's like formulas that you probably saw, like in statistics, probability, stats, and calculus, and all those crazy mathematician formulas. But to Lisa's point, as my lovely fellow like astronaut in training there, yeah, it is heavy. But the one thing that I can say in a simple way is that Polygon Matic and Ethereum are pretty much, yeah, I mean, they're pretty much doing the same thing. They're just wrapping it up in different wrapping and different branding. The key right now is not all of them are going to survive when the markets move forward into seeing which blockchain, which nodes of the blockchain are the financial services going to land on. That's probably where I would say that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. And Polygon Matic might have reasonable fees, but it still has to sort of go the test of time. And the test of time is really whether or not it can handle the level of programmatic logic that will be going through it at the speed at which it needs to go through. And the dovetail statement of an article that came out yesterday or the day before was this: Wall Street traders and Wall Street's not very happy with Solana. They're saying that it's not moving fast enough for the algorithms that are required to keep those cases and those processes going. And they were really like raising an eyebrow whether or not Solana is going to be the right chain. So I would definitely, I'll see if I can find that article to pin it up in my Twitter. But I know I was reading down this road a bit because, as I said months ago, and I know Kieran was in the room the other day, it was great to see him again, that the derivatives market still needs to go on a blockchain. And it was, I believe his name is Jeff Booth, who's an economist or something like that. I don't even know what role he sits in this whole equation, but he was discussing how when I go in to implement a system and I do an as is to be process, the as is system is the one that's been there for a while, but it's got flaws. The to be system is the new innovative and what takes a bit of the old that makes sense and it brings about the new, and then you have a new system. But you still have to cut over from the old system to the new system. When you see what's happening right now is a lot of the older systems that are frankly falling apart, it seems, are now being eloquently readdressed and reformatted and refitted and updated and upgraded in new systems. And they still need to bring those processes over, but the ones that could handle the processes would have to withstand the pressure and the uptime that's required to be managing all of that at once. And that's where I think you see Polygon and Matic and Solana and Avalanche having a little bit of the quote unquote Ethereum killer conversations, because they really haven't seen the flood of records come in. But when the flood of records come in, you're going to really see who has the power to hold up all those records, because that's in essence what it is. Distributed ledger technology is a massive amount of records. And that's where they're going to sit. And at the end of the day, if the blockchain can't handle it, then what do we use? So it's going to have to be one that's going to be able to handle that amount of transactions that'll be going through it at one point in time.
Okay, let's pause there. And I'm very curious, how deep is that well that you are currently sitting in? That sounds like you are in.
Oh, you mean like the fact that I'm in the room with the computer so the puppy doesn't drive me crazy?
No,
Yeah.
it sounds like you are in a aluminum box of some kind, or
We could go in that conspiracy theory like I'm
okay,
hiding myself from
right?
all the
Yes,
crazy.
You're in a bunker.
you're in a bunker. Yeah. Okay, so the next story is about it's about the Beatles and NFTs. Believe it or not, John Lennon's son Julian Lennon plans to auction off memorabilia as NFTs, including handwritten notes from Hey Jude. Lennon will retain the physical counterparts. He's calling it the Lennon Collection, the NFT collection. Oh, Lennon Connection, the NFT collection. And Rolling Stone says, what else is there? The sale will take place online February 7th via Julian's Auctions and NFT partner Yellow Heart. The sale includes such items as the black cape John Lennon wore in the movie Yelp and Paul McCartney's handwritten notes for Hey Jude, originally titled Hey Jules. McCartney wrote the song for Julian Lennon, as pretty much any Beatles fanatic knows. Potential bidders should keep in mind, though, that the items up for sale are only those one-of-one blockchain tokens. The actual coat, McCartney's actual notes, and the other actual items are not for sale and will remain in Julian Lennon's possession. Additionally, the sale includes NFTs of John's Afghan coat from the Magical Mystery Tour and NFTs of 3 Gibson guitars John gifted to Julian. As for the prices, the Hey Jude NFT is expected to fetch the biggest price with an estimated $50,000 to $70,000, while clothing items NFTs could go for $8,000 to $20,000. The 3 guitar NFTs are estimated to sell for around $6,000 to $8,000. Quote, as an artist, I have great respect for all that my father accomplished in his career, Julian Lennon said. As a son, I hold dear the good memories I have of my time with him. I feel incredibly lucky to live in a day and age where innovation allows me to share such personal pieces of my Lennon family history. Through this NFT collection, I am able to grant exclusive access to special items that I cherish and carry on the legacy of my father in a new way.
Tyler,
Yes.
on a related point of John Lennon and the Beatles NFTs, there is a organization that is actually in process of minting and bringing forth some unseen footage as NFTs, and they're coming out of LA. There's some really, really unique. I've had the pleasure to see it, and I'm humbled. I was literally almost in tears when I saw some of this footage. But they have actual footage, private footage that's never been seen, that's been allowed finally to be released. And it's literally about the time with John and Yoko Ono and just them sharing the time together when they're building these songs. And it's so touching and so moving, and they've found a few of them. They had access to a few of them. They've gotten out of like the non-disclosures of those non-competes that go on forever and ever and ever. And now they want to bring it forward to share those with the fans and with the people that really, really were so connected to John Lennon and Yoko Ono during the time where they were bringing the music to life.
Alrighty. Next up is from the Financial Times. As Microsoft acquires Activision, a look at the state of the gaming industry, which generated $180 billion last year in 2021, double that of the movie industry. So as somebody from Hollywood myself, it was a notable moment when the gaming industry surpassed Hollywood, and that was a huge buzz whenever that was, 2005 or whenever, about video games is bigger than movies. Oh my goodness, right? Even though video games at that time didn't have an awards show, didn't really have much in the way of celebrities or anything like that, but in general, it's a bigger industry, and now it's twice the size. So that the Financial Times does a deep dive on this $75 billion move on Activision that has detonated a bomb under the games industry. Yeah, Makes sense because big tech like Microsoft, Google, Apple, Facebook, what have you, Amazon, in the same way that they're going all in on content, right? Where they're going to all the movie festivals, the film festivals, the Sundance Film Festival, Tribeca Film Festival, Venice Biennial. They're doing all the film festivals, and they're paying for doing deals for all of this future juicy content, the next Squid Game, whatever it might be, right? So similarly, you noticed, did you not, one of the biggest headlines at the end of 2021 is that Netflix itself is getting into video games, right? Well, that's an indication right there that Netflix is going to go into video games, and it's a strong indicator that Google, who wants to have their own Netflix, of course, so does Apple. Apple does try to do it with Apple TV. Disney does as well. Well, it wouldn't surprise anybody then, would it, if Disney were to acquire some video game producers, right, and bundle that in with Disney Plus, and then you have kids using Disney Plus, and they've got video games, because God knows when kids play video games, they'll play for 10 hours at a goddamn time. So, and that's the name of that whole game that they're in, which is captive audience eyeballs. And it could be ad-based video game. So between every time your character dies in the video game, you see an ad. Why not? So, Clinton, welcome back to the Tech News Twitter Spaces stage. I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. It's fascinating talk there about all these different services. Netflix, Google, Microsoft, so on and so forth. What would be really great is if they bundled all of these services together and they called it cable.
Yeah.
And that would make things so much easier for all of us.
You pay $60 a month and good luck getting off of it.
Yeah.
Tyler?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David. No, what Clinton's pointing out, and everybody that knows what's going on is thinking the same thing Clinton's thinking, which is these moves really start to look a lot like the cable bundling era of the 80s or whatever. In a weird way, the platforms are becoming starting to behave in those kinds of ways again. David, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of circling back to the walled garden. I mean, but in a much bigger way. Just in time for the metaverse, everybody. Isn't that fortunate? But I wanted to just kind of also, with regards to the games discussion, it definitely looked like that's going to be a content area that, in addition to Microsoft doing what it's doing, conceivably these other firms will look into doing that as well, as you stated. Just the one thing about like somebody playing a game and then throwing an ad in front of them, there's many times. I mean, the games industry is always, they've been pioneering lots of monetization models. Just that's what they've done. They pioneer lots of these, and there's going to be an interesting little surprise when some of those big walled gardens want to try to shove ads too much into a gamer's face. I just want to kind of point that out. Gamers are very, fickle, and you just don't want to interrupt their experience. It depends on the game and all of that, but I just wanted to kind of state that.
Yeah, well, it gets weird, as you just mentioned, presciently, the metaverse, because that's where the two really meet head on, because it's the video game and the movie start to really that Venn diagram that overlap, just a tiny bit, in 2021 really start to overlap very significantly, very quickly as we get into the metaverse. And some of the games that I've played in the metaverse, the few that I have played that have narratives to them, because not all games have narratives, but many do. And if you're playing a narrative-based video game in the metaverse, if you feel like you're a character in a movie, honestly. So it really starts to blur the line between these, what are historically separate categories. And you see why these platforms who are in the business of eyeball capture really shouldn't make that big of a distinction between the two, because they're merging right towards each other. And the video game.
Well, Tyler, yes. I think that adds to the whole like product placement inside these games. I mean, there's a whole effort in a couple of the games to like promote, green tech in games like Fortnite and some others they implement these things in there. So I don't, just like in TV shows, I think that product placement will eventually happen on a huge scale inside these games.
What happens if the content is dynamically editable, personalizable to the user based on that headline that we read of Google's new entry, however Google's going to be tracking you and however they're sharing that with publishers, they're going to know, like I was saying earlier, that I'm in the market to buy paddle boards. The next thing you know, there's a paddle board in my VR experience, right? So
Tyler, that's exactly right. So product placement in games has been going on for 2 decades at least. I mean, I did that back at Nickelodeon. So product placement in games, same as in TV. But to your point, it's going to be much more targeted. So, and it can be, depending on where we end up with privacy, it can be much more individually targeted.
that would be the ultimate, right? I mean, a stepping stone towards the ultimate is you're going to see personalized content in these metaverse game experiences that are relevant to you. That's going to blow people away. Like instead of today we see photos of objects that we might have an interest in. We call that an advertisement, whether it's on a bus or the side of a building or on a website, or due to the power of the internet, and sometimes it's not an image, it's a video on the side of a building or a bus or on a website. But what happens when we break through that 2D screen and go into the metaverse, and now the advertisement is the experience, but it's dynamically generated in the middle of the video game, where all of a sudden the character in the video game, is becomes a salesperson.
Tyler, that's exactly right. So that's a really good point. So when I did this back at Nickelodeon, that was the problem, was that a lot of people, because again, we were dealing with kids, is that they don't realize that the video game is the advertisement. So as you're pointing out, I mean, can you imagine like if you're in a metaverse and all of a sudden, whatever, you start, they know you like canoes. And so all of a sudden you see water around you and yada, yada, and then a canoe. But they'll be much more savvy than that. But as you're saying, the experience is the advertisement, and that's going to be pretty subliminal and targeted. So that's going to be actually a really good savvy
And
point there.
this speaks to why variety is appearing more and more in our tech headlines, in the recent months. And by the way, that's true of the next article yet again. In a YouTube creator update, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki defends hiding dislikes, discusses adding NFT support to YouTube. Oh boy, here we go. And says creators that are making more than $10,000 a year increased 40% year over year, among other things. So it's a big interview, and there's a whole bunch of revelations like the ones I just mentioned. Last year, YouTube established a $100 million fund for Shorts, which is their version of TikTok, which is definitely one of the things they got to keep a very close eye on. Other points the CEO addressed in the update, as I mentioned, she defended YouTube's decision to hide public dislike counts, saying that the dislike feature was harming parts of our ecosystem through dislike attacks. And so removing the dislike count neuters or neutralizes dislike attacks, because they don't know how many people have done it or not. So there's no ability to kind of gang up on the dislikes. YouTube is looking to expand the ways that creators can make money, including through technologies like NFTs. And in 2021, YouTube channel memberships and paid digital goods were purchased or renewed more than 110 million times. The number of YouTube channels worldwide making more than 10,000 per year increased 40%. As I said, YouTube supported more than 800,000 jobs in 2020 in the US, Europe, Japan, Korea, China, Brazil, and others. That's a lot. 800,000 jobs in the YouTube ecosystem. Pretty significant. YouTube has been testing live shopping. Oh, really? Oh, really? Live? What? Hold on a second. Hold the phone, Tyrone. YouTube's doing what now? Live shopping? Did you hear that sound? Did somebody hear a sound? I'm pretty sure I heard a sound of somebody starting to make. You think people are making money on YouTube now? Wait till they start selling shit through the live streams, like they're doing in social media in Southeast Asia, and most notably China, where one dude, the Lipstick King, again sold $1 billion in 24 hours. Take that, Mr. Beast. So imagine and by the way, Mr. Beast is dabbling in selling shit. One of the biggest things he's ever did was set up a whole bunch of hamburgers for a day, and that went berserk. And that gives you just a tiny taste of what's to come. YouTube has been testing live shopping in the US, as I said they would do when we started this show 10 months ago. They're testing it in the US, South Korea, and Brazil. In 2022, the platform will, quote, bring shopping to more creators and brands by partnering with commerce platforms like Shopify. Oh, there it is. There it is. Although, yeah, what can I say? We saw that announcement live when we did the live stream on the Google I/O event back in April, May, June, whenever it was. In the third quarter 2021, YouTube's volatile view rate, which represents the percentage of views on YouTube that come from content that violates its policies. Oh, here's a chance to play our favorite show. What percent of YouTube's views come from content that violates YouTube's policies? Great question.
33.333.
11%.
25%.
61. 58.9.
55%.
72.
Okay,
66.6.
Oh, I was close. Boo. Sorry.
You all overbid. So, but I don't blame you, because in 2017, the correct answer was 70%. However, YouTube is now claiming that they've really solved that puzzle, and they now have reduced it to 0.1%.
But that's YouTube, right? Is there a third-party data point research?
It's their own metrics, yeah. So anyway, but that's if they said that it was at 70% in 2017, they might be right. That's incredibly high. 70% of the content views are based on content that violates their policies, and they've had a long time to work on it. 0.1% though, I agree, that seems a little low. So
just one remark about the YouTube dislikes. There actually is a plugin you can get to still be able to see the dislike count. So we'll see how long that stays up.
So next up is a look at Orange DAO, a crypto collective made up of 1,000 Y Combinator founders that has closed an initial fund and invested in 30 Web3 startups. A crypto collective backing Web3 startups is seeking new members. The only condition for joining, applicants must be alumni of the Y Combinator Accelerator. Well, there you go. Orange DAO. It looks like Ben Huh of I Can Has Cheeseburger is kind of the main brain behind it. Alrighty. Next up is Hyderabad-based company called Darwinbox, which offers cloud-based HR management software, raises $72 million. London-based BCB Group, which offers financial services to Coinbase, Kraken, and others, raises $60 million. Some developers who use Apple's CloudKit have complained about an iCloud syncing bug for some months. And union officials say that nearly half of the 6,000 Amazon workers eligible to vote in the Bessemer, Alabama are new. Ballots are due March 28th, so they're going to have a re-vote down there at the Bessemer, Alabama Amazon plant, which lost, it was about 33% previously. Last time around voted for this. That was back, I don't know, April, May, June. And now they're going to give it a second go because a whole bunch of people, nearly half of the people who work there, are new in the past 6 months. Tencent fires 70 people and bans 13 companies for bribery and embezzlement as China continues oversight of the tech sector in China. Coinbase adds a tax center to its app and website that aggregates taxable crypto transactions to help U.S. users figure out how much they may owe the IRS. there's some significant compliance going on right there. And by the way, unbeknownst to most people, the same kind of things happening behind the scenes with what's the company I'm thinking of? Airbnb is secretly behind the scenes complying with local city governments for hosts paying local taxes, if you know what I mean. So, what's the point I'm trying to make here? That basically cities, it's a similar issue. Governments don't like crypto until they realize, oh, wow, how much money are we collecting in taxes now? And Coinbase says, oh, you don't like us? You want to regulate us? Oh, by the way, do you realize how much money we are collecting on your behalf from our users? How does $1 billion sound? Oh, wow, all of a sudden you like us. Oh, wow, what a surprise. Airbnb found out the same thing. Cities were trying to shut down Airbnb. Airbnb started collecting taxes of the hosts, built a dashboard for the city officials without the city officials ever asking for it, built them their dream dashboard so they can see every host in the city, how much tax each host is making, yada, 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 yada. Next thing you know, the city found out they're getting a check from Airbnb, $1 million a month. Now the city loves Airbnb. What do you know?
Yeah, but Tyler, again, every so often I'll chime in on how it used to be a multi-stakeholder form of capitalism, right? So I mean, that's great. That's great, and hopefully a lot more different services are going to start to do what is obviously something that they should be doing. So it's absolutely right. The municipality should get excited, but that's something that should really take hold and be something that's I won't use the R for regulation word, but it's just something that's just the right thing to do.
Okay, next up, autonomous sidewalk delivery robot company Starship Technologies. And you should probably know this one by now. They are the OG sidewalk robot with the 6 little wheels, which has been carbon copied by none other than another little startup called Amazon. It's a shipping company. It's like an e-commerce site called Amazoni. They copied Starship, and although they painted it blue, God bless them. And then you have Yandex out of Russia, who is kind of the Google of Russia, the big tech of Russia, is also cloned Starship Technologies out of Estonia. This cute little robot company out of Estonia nailed the form factor right out of the box, and now they're being carbon copied by Yandex and Amazon and everybody else. And now they've raised another 50 million euros from the EU's investment arm to expand its fleet of autonomous sidewalk delivery robots. But by the way, that whole space is exploding. All of the autonomous delivery stuff and the robots, it's going big in a very big way if you watch these headlines of fundraisings. So because of the incredible number of millions and even billions that are going into autonomous robots and delivery robots, the pace of the innovation is going to get fast and furious, and next thing you know, you're going to find yourself living in a cardboard box down by the river. So watch out, because that change it used to be very slow going in the innovation on that. And to that point, a whole bunch of people are tweeting at me in the past hour since we started about the robot at the Beijing Olympics that is doing what? I forget. No doubt somebody on stage knows. Is it making coffee or ice cream or something? There's a robot that's greeting people in Beijing today, and it's got a whole bunch
making cocktail bartending.
It's a bartender. There you go. Oh, and
they can do one cocktail in 60 seconds.
Right.
40 per hour.
There you go. Good luck competing with that, Tom Cruise. So that we can now add bartenders to the ever-growing list of people that will be replaced, or occupations that will be replaced by these one-armed robots that can do it flawlessly, endlessly, with no health insurance, with no sick days, with no protests and riots yet. Heaven forbid we have a robot riot or protest. That'll be a dark day indeed, as seen in the Terminator. But for now, they're going to be very compliant and make more cocktails than any human ever could for 1/100th of the cost. So the next article, shall we, is...
Can we talk about tax base on that too?
Sure.
So part of the things being pulled out of the model there is if the the labor's income gets taxed, right? So there's a tax that goes there. So you're replacing labor not only with what you're paying them, but what they're paying in taxes. So, depending on the model you want to kind of think about deploying with AI powered fill in the blank, in this case a robot, labor replace automation, right? Why shouldn't we consider, like, hey, if you are replacing a labor, is there a model that allows us as a society to extract some level of tax? Other than just because we'd have to, that person's going to need to get unemployment, some kind of benefit for a period of time, and then I don't know. It's taxes are used as a socioeconomic tool to kind of manage these types of things, right? So, anyways, I just a thought I'd share there.
Okay. Well, the next one, I might want to skip for 2 seconds, but let me tell you why first. It's about, it's from Billboard magazine, again, Hollywood in the news. A look at the piracy issues. Well, you heard that ding. I'll explain what that means. Okay. So it says, a look at the piracy issues plaguing blockchain-based music streamer Audius, as users easily find unlicensed albums from Kanye West, Drake, and others. Backed by Katy Perry and a whole bunch and other notable people, the blockchain-based network isn't paying rights holders for legally uploaded music. Well, it's because it's blockchain-based and they're not in the content moderation phase of their development yet, So, by the way, YouTube used to allow all kinds of illegal shit, and over time they address it. And same with, this is just how platforms evolve. They're still in their infancy, yada yada. Now, one of their biggest investors is one of my dearest friends, Ash Bernori, aka Ash, who has joined us regularly here in Tech News, who's most known as the other half of Avicii. And Ash, as you know, when he comes in, I just pinged him because I know he's one of the leading investors in this very hot blockchain startup. And I said, hey, we're talking about Audius in Clubhouse right now. Do you want to pop in? And those dings you heard is him replying, at a dinner, brother, tell them I said hi with a kissy face emoji. So Ash says hello to everybody. And he's at dinner, so he's not able to comment on this article, unfortunately. But it's a super interesting startup. And at this point, this is actually going to work to their advantage. This is going to make the service go bananas. That Billboard magazine is promoting that you can get all of this. It's like a deja vu of Napster all over again because it's blockchain based. The big difference this time is good luck shutting it down because it's very easy it's a challenge to shut these things down. So anyway, Billboard just did an article on Audius, and they're writing in the context that people are able to get access to licensed music, and that the Audius hasn't licensed the music. But you as a user can hop right on, download it now, download all this, every song you could ever imagine. It's kind of like, an interesting window of opportunity for people who want to download, terabytes of, music for free for the time being. And no doubt this is going to force an issue where Audius is then going to make deals with the rights holders and whatnot. And my buddy Ash knows that game better than anybody. So, yeah, unfortunately he won't be able to answer, but hopefully maybe tomorrow we'll circle back on this one, and hopefully he won't be at dinner. No doubt I'll chat with him before tomorrow so we can arrange that, and that would be very cool. So the next one is, I think it's just a whole bunch of fundraising announcements. There was a big one from the Wall Street Journal. They say they have internal documents over there at Facebook, as they're known to do, the Facebook files, that Facebook's free low data service for developing countries has led to unexpected charges for users totaling millions of dollars a month. Oh, dear God, Wall Street Journal, it never ends with you clowns over there. This is ridiculous. And thank you to everyone who shared this one in. I think Evan did, yes. And I think Ken did too. It's a really good point. And let me pin it to the top of the room, and hopefully I'll pin it to the top of Clubhouse. Cheryl can pin it to the top of the Twitter Spaces, because for those who don't know, we're in both apps simultaneously. And this article says that Facebook says it's helping millions of the world's poorest people get online through apps and services that allow them to use the internet data free. Internal company documents show that many of these people end up being charged in amounts that collectively add up to an estimated millions of dollars a month. Right. Well, let me explain. It's actually very simple if you have more than 10 brain cells. Let's see if you do. Let's take the quiz. Facebook says it's helping millions of both. The issue is both of those things can be true simultaneously. I know this is a bizarre concept. Try and follow it with me. Facebook says it's helping millions of the world's poorest people get online through apps and services that allow them to use the internet for free. And then I can verify this as a truth, as fact. Facebook is indeed gives free internet in the developing world, very notably Indonesia, one of the most populous countries on the planet, by the way, which I know Americans will find that confusing because they've never heard of it. But trust me, Indonesia is an actual country, and it actually is very big population.
I'm sure they heard about Bali.
Generally not, sadly. So, although they should. Bali's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Anyway, so the Facebook does in developing countries, like the Philippines, like Indonesia, gives free internet with a few catches. Qualcomm, based in San Diego, California, built a special little trick that allows apps to pay for the data of their own apps. So Facebook pays for the data when you're using Facebook. And what that has, and Facebook is kind of brilliant here, what that has led to is, if you have a smartphone in Southeast Asia, Facebook is free to use. The other apps are not. You see where this is going? You got it right. Facebook ends up being the internet for those people who don't want to pay for the internet. You can understand why. It's free. They can do everything. And they start using Facebook. They don't want to pay for the regular internet. They're using Facebook. And this is kind of genius for Facebook. And it turns out they were able to monetize those people more than it cost them for the data. Now, so the first sentence is true, that Facebook is helping millions of the world's poorest people get online through apps and services that allow them to use the internet data free. Period. Second sentence. Can the second sentence also be true while the first sentence is true? Sentence number 2. Internal company documents at Facebook show that many of these people end up being charged amounts that collectively add up to an estimated millions of dollars a month. Well, I sure hope so, because you're talking about a billion fucking people who are collectively paying about 10 cents. Now, do you have any evidence that they've tricked people into doing this? Does it benefit Facebook at all that people start paying for this internet? No, not at all. In fact, it works against Facebook's interest that these people start paying for the internet to use the other apps on their phones, you idiots.
I believe the same thing happens with WhatsApp as well. They deliver micropayments to aid the business, right? And we know that through the terms and conditions, whenever you log into, because you do log into your WhatsApp, right? And they have this like system where you can message, but it's not really SMS, it's something else. And yeah, WhatsApp does that. I'm sure Facebook does that as well, if they're letting you use the internet, which is quite a big thing, right? It's leapfrogging all of the other businesses, and when it's 10 cents or something like that, it's not a massive problem if it's exactly like what they do with WhatsApp, that is.
Okay, so check this out. Second paragraph. To attract new users, Facebook made deals with cellular carriers in countries including Pakistan, Indonesia, and Philippines. Oh wow, what a surprise. They've been doing this for nearly a decade, by the way. To let low-income people use a limited version of Facebook and browse some of the other websites without data charges. How dare they?
Honestly, I want to just give a
you,
testimonial for that. Facebook Lite, I think it's called in Nigeria, has helped me connect with so many of my family members because of the way that Facebook generated this version.
I'm sorry
of Facebook.
for your tragedy.
So I just want to say, like, on that point, that
On
was funny.
behalf of the Wall Street
But
Journal, I want to apologize to you and your family on that the tragedy they're inflicting on you by giving you free internet. It's a real tragedy. Hopefully, we can take
Yeah, so
them to that
Tyler, can I
state.
can I comment on this a
Go
little
ahead,
bit?
Madonna. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've experienced this here in Tanzania over the years. Essentially, like obviously on your Facebook feed and Facebook app, you're using it for free on a mobile operator, and you know there's a YouTube video or an article, just like it's pinned here. Obviously, you click on it, and often there's a pop-up that comes up that says you're about to leave Facebook. Do you want to go? You're going to get charged. And it's actually quite a bad user experience after a while because if you're constantly doing that, um, like sometimes maybe they don't do it and they think that you might get the message that you're leaving Facebook and you're going to get charged. So I'm wondering if that's part of the issue. It's like they're trying to optimize the user experience, but constantly telling you you're leaving Facebook to go and get charged somewhere else might be quite a bad user experience for the users as well. So I tried to skim the article is quite long. It's there's a lot of detail in it, but yeah, like there's a lot of nuance around exactly how this is being implemented in different carriers. Maybe there's a billing issue with the carriers themselves. I mean, the carriers aren't necessarily great at this in some markets
By the way,
in implementing it. So yeah, just want to
you
put that.
as usual, you are scratching right on the sore spot because guess who benefits by the users paying money? Facebook? No. Carriers? Absolutely. That's where do you think the money goes when they're paying the money? Do you think that money goes to Facebook? No. Is Facebook charging people anything? No. Who is? The carriers. So guess who's actually benefiting? Guess who would like you to click the button that says, yes, I would like to leave the Facebook's free ecosystem and go over to the paid ecosystem? It's the carriers.
And
Yeah,
that's
Facebook.
also why carriers would first place, Tyler, right? Why would they do this with Facebook, right? If it's the pitch is that Facebook is telling the carriers, oh, you have a lot of users that are not on the internet, and your ARPU is going down. People are not spending enough money on your every month. Why don't you give them this Facebook free, and then they will start jumping into other things and pay you. That's the pitch, right? What they should be doing, just going to finish this off, what they should be doing to make it a more seamless experience is they should be offering you a data package once you start doing that enough. They should be saying, hey, you do realize that you're paying, out of bundle, whatever it is, in your telco. Do you want to buy for $10, 1 gig a month, whatever it is? They should be doing that. I don't think I've seen them do that, but that would be one way to kind of help the experience for the user so that they don't get the bill shock. Because the thing is, there's obviously if they keep doing this and getting and actually getting billed, they might actually altogether quit using these services. But if they on-ramp them to like a data plan or for the month, for the week, it could be good. I mean, you'd be surprised. I call it, it's data literacy. Some people don't know how much a megabyte or a gigabyte actually is worth, right? Sometimes I'm on a Zoom call in the taxi and the taxi driver thinks that, I'm paying tons of money for data. I'm like, no, this is not really that much. I mean, a couple of 100 megabytes for 10, 20 minutes, and they're like shocked because they don't know how much it takes, right? Just because they don't know the data rates, because Facebook is making it hard, right? So just wanted to add that as well.
So the
Yes, it
article.
really.
Go ahead.
If I may, I think the whole idea of internet access, the fact that they're offering internet access for free, this is not something that's uncommon. We had that with back in the day with the AOL CDs. You got a CD, there was some restricted access, but the fact that they're offering this kind of moves us to the conversation about should internet access be a human right? And that's a conversation worth having, definitely. But giving these people an opportunity to participate in the digital economy, I don't see that as a bad thing. But if they have prices that they can't afford, then that can be a little contentious, especially for the lower economic folks.
Well,
yeah, this
mobile
is the
data.
one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point where like this is like one of the rare few times that it's not necessarily Facebook's obligation to be super explicit and create these systems for the people. Like they are letting them use free Facebook. Anything outside that is not necessarily their jurisdiction, and giving them a fair warning that they are about to go into a paid version is basically everything that they should know, and outside of that is the person's obligation, right? Like, so what I see is that Facebook is protected, like in every way, shape, and form, and they understand that. It's just that Wall Street Journal was making this highly known. But yeah, go on, David.
Anyway, but here's the problem, as usual, is the headline, the actual headline says, Facebook promised poor countries free internet. People got charged anyway. True, technically true, implying that Facebook is charging them, correct? When you read that as just a headline, it is implying that Facebook did something wrong and is guilty of doing something and is charging people when they promised that they wouldn't, right? That's what that does it not? As a headline, as a crafted piece of clickbait, they are intentionally disparaging Facebook, knowingly, intentionally misinforming, misleading negatively against Facebook, which, by the way, Sarah Palin is currently suing the New York Times for doing. So, the question is, are they doing it knowingly? Because if they are, they can be sued for it, as Sarah Palin's doing with the New York Times, who had to apologize and do a retraction and the whole thing. Now, the problem is the Wall Street Journal is making a regular habit of doing this. That, to me, is the issue. And it's, again, just we're losing count on the number of times that the Wall Street Journal is intentionally trying to demonize Facebook for something. And there you are. By the way, just to add a little data context to these populations, here are the top 5 biggest countries on the planet. Anyone want? This is the easiest version of Tech News Jeopardy ever. Number 1, China. Right. Number 2, India. Number 3, United States. Number 4, Indonesia. Number 5, Pakistan. These are 2 of the 5 biggest countries on the planet that they're doing this in. These are not small countries. I know. Again, the only reason I'm reading this is because Americans can't even spell Indonesia. They don't even know that it's an actual country. They're mistaking it for like, a spot on the Monopoly board or something. Turns out Indonesia is actually a country with a flag and a currency and people and the whole deal. In fact, it's barely smaller than America itself. America. I know you've never heard of it. But similar with Pakistan. I know you're confused about where Pakistan is. It's 220 million people, right? Similar with Philippines, as I was saying. These are very, very, very large countries that you have never heard of. I know, it's crazy. The American education system is tragically broken, but turns out that the combination of these countries is approaching 1 billion people. So the idea that 1 billion people are spending a few $1 million because their carriers in those countries are greedy, we're talking yes. Is this surprising to anybody at all? Even a tiny bit, that 1 billion people, 1 billion, are spending a few $1 million on cellular connectivity charges by opting into saying, yes, I do want to leave the Facebook free ecosystem and watch this YouTube video. Is this at all a surprise to anybody? Now, what kind of sinister scammeister must you be to try and craft an article to create the headline that you see at the top of the room, that Facebook promises poor countries free internet, people got charged anyway, implying that Facebook is the demonic force behind these people watching these YouTube videos? What kind of scumbag must you be to do that?
You have good.
Tyler, is there ever like a anti-Facebook article that you would actually like approve of?
Yes,
I mean, it seems to always come down into it's like, well, it's an old school media thing, so it must be a scam or conspiracy. I mean, yes, there's obvious oversights, but I hear a lot of pro Facebook stuff around here, and I kind of rarely hear the opposite.
Fine, find the article there are no. It's not challenging to find articles of Facebook doing negative. We did it earlier in this show. We were talking about Facebook's not trusted, or was that? I'm sorry, that was 24 hours ago when we were here, about Facebook's trust is at 30%. And I said, no doubt. And that was decades in the making and well earned, was my comment yesterday.
So I'll say it. One of the startups I worked with was one of the inaugural Apple SIM companies. So, years ago, a lot of the old business travel data, when you would travel internationally, the data rates were insane. Like, you go on a business trip for a week, you come back with over $1,000 data bill type of thing. And so what there is a big part of this story that's not being told. I don't have the story in front of me with regards to the gouging that the carriers do. So do kind of some of them wanted, and Demilari kind of we're speaking to as well. So I mean that to get the full picture of the full calculus, absolutely the the gouging is for sure the evildoer, what have you. But this is a story where Facebook, and I'll say it, this is that story where Facebook is helping onboard people onto the internet. So, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I almost came on stage to just freaking give it to Facebook, but then as the article went on, it just showed that they're not necessarily doing something bad. And yeah, and when it comes to obviously underprivileged people, I'm a big proponent of them and defender in certain spaces like these. So, but it doesn't seem like Facebook has that intention, or not even intention. They're not doing that explicitly, as the Wall Street Journal is saying.
We are now into the tweets, by the way. So check this out. I'm just going to go ahead and jump up to one of the tweets that I know I saw a moment ago. Is this it? Where is it? No, it's not that one. Where is it? Where is the tweet? It was about the NFT community doesn't trust Facebook. And where is somebody tweeted that in? Does anyone know who was that? You who tweeted that in? If it was you, I need to find that link. NFT, here it is. Found it. Thank you very much. I'm retweeting it now to the Tech News Twitter account. It's from Pat L. Smee. And let me go ahead and pin it to the top of the clubhouse room so we can all read along. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, get ready. You're about to witness one handsome genius Tyler Crowley shit talk Facebook. Yet again, here we go. It says, NFT artist to Meta, formerly known as Facebook, we don't trust you, is the headline from Forbes. I have to say, I agree 1,000%, nor should they. Not at all. Not for 1 second, not even a little bit. And the article begins, Serwa Atafua has no use for Meta anymore. The Australian artist who creates Afro-futuristic abstract NFTs has 20,000 followers on Instagram, the Meta subsidiary. The platform, which she says originally helped her create a community, sell her work, and grow her audience, has changed. Scams, data privacy concerns, and copyright infringements of her art are now an everyday part of life, and she's interacting on Instagram a lot less lately. Meta plans to dive into the world of internet art known as non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, according to the Financial Times. But Atafua says she's not seduced by the possibilities of commerce on Facebook, another Meta subsidiary, which boasts nearly 3 billion global followers. Quote, to be honest, she says, I do not really trust any of these platforms. NFT artists around the world contacted by Forbes echoed her concerns. Many have begun fleeing Instagram, migrating to other platforms like Twitter, or gradually reducing their use of it. They expressed skepticism that Meta, a social media behemoth, could develop, launch, and manage a marketplace where they weren't looking over their shoulders, alert to the next swindle. Itzel Yard, the best-selling female NFT artist in the world, said Instagram is sprawling with impersonators. In my case, someone scraped my Instagram like they just took everything from it and they posted it on OpenSea, another online marketplace, and they started trying to sell it, Yard told Forbes. NFT experts and artists say they're wary of Meta's gambit for a number of reasons. It's a centralized business. While the NFT community prizes decentralization and autonomy, Meta has tried to censor content on its platforms. While NFT artists value free expression, there's also a suspicion that Meta is only jumping on the bandwagon to capitalize on Web3's innovation that can make it a lot of money. Damn right, that's why they're doing it. Damn right, that's why they're doing it. In January, NFT trading broke records, topping $4 billion in sales on OpenSea as celebrities and fashion brands got involved. Blah, 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 blah. Now, the interesting point here is Facebook has a long, rich history of seducing people into growing content on their apps, namely Facebook and Instagram, and then You think you're building an audience, and next thing you know, you don't own that audience at all. You can't export it or take it anywhere or do anything with it outside of that app. And you used to, people, do you remember the days when people put follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram all over their store windows and on their delivery trucks and everything else? Because they thought that they could have a relationship with you. And then Facebook pulled one of the most egregious scumbag moves of all times. And then when you started sharing content, they said, do you want to pay to reach those users that you said should follow you? Because if you actually want to reach all those people that you've been working very hard to connect to, you're going to have to pay for that, right? And that will haunt them and should haunt them forever, because that was a massive FU to everybody who jumped into that ecosystem over the past 2 decades nearly. And this is pure karma in its purest form, where now the NFT folks are like, hey, you have a history of screwing people who invest in your platform in terms of content and building their brand on your platform. So forgive me for thinking that I don't want to do it on your centralized platform. I want to do it in a truly decentralized way. And that is part of the beautiful point of where we're at in 2022, which is the average users are starting to have a fundamental understanding of the core difference between a centralized platform and a decentralized platform. And
Can I
people,
add something as well?
yeah, but very importantly, people were opting in somewhat somewhat unknowingly into these very siloed centralized systems, not realizing that they were kind of trapping themselves, painting themselves into a bit of a corner. And now people are waking up to that, and now the gig is up, and people don't want to get fooled again, and the NFT opportunity is massive outside of Facebook and these platforms and everything in this article. I have no problem with this article whatsoever. This is a great indictment of Facebook's roosters coming home to roost, the chickens coming home to roost, because this is the bed that they made for themselves in, not being, trying to enriching themselves at the cost of their users. And that's just, they have a very rich history of doing that, as this article kind of points to. It is what it is. There's no defense of it. I challenge anyone to try and defend Facebook in this article.
Yeah, and there is no defense, right? And I think this conversation happened on Twitter Spaces because I did see those people actually speak on there, and it was like this 4 hour, I think maybe even 6 hour conversation. At least that's how long I saw the conversation there for. And it was just really talking about all of these things that we understand as creators, right? So with even tech news around the world and all of these other platforms, it's like you're creating an audience, and what can you do with that audience, right? And one of the main things where I knew there was a switch in the mindset was me speaking to creators and seeing that once reels came, you would think, oh, they would make more, they'll start making reels, right? The answer is no, because more people are actually moving to TikTok, seeing as if videos is where it's at, then the most powerful video platform right now to grow your audience is TikTok. So people are actually not taking to reels as Facebook intended, right? So they will make their TikTok and then copy and paste that video onto Reels. And that's generally how the content cycle is going. And it's generally the same thing on Twitter Spaces as well. As much as Twitter Spaces is kind of good and is okay because you kind of have your audience there, the reach and the organic reach for it is not as good as what Clubhouses is. So we have all of these new features and use cases, but the reality is these are just copies of something else. And because you're already an ad-based platform, you're not really gonna create a feature that it actually benefits the creator. So there's that.
So
Tyler,
Tyler,
I'd also like to add on to what you had shared about Facebook ads and all of that. Um, oh my goodness. If you accept the bait of Facebook, asking you to pay $5 and you can reach 3,000 people, and $10 you can reach 5,000. Once you take that bait and pay for an ad, you might have had good reach before you placed your first ad, but once you've taken that bait and pay for an ad, the algorithm changes, and thereafter they kind of force you to be codependent on reaching many people, because I have several nonprofit organizations and a couple businesses that have Facebook pages, and I'm also the admin of other organizations that I'm an admin for. And you can totally tell how the algorithm shifts, where you're not hardly getting any, likes or people sharing your information and commenting on your posts, because once you start paying for ads, they want you to be codependent on reaching the masses. And so it completely shifts how many people are being exposed to what your postings are on your pages, whether it's nonprofit or for profit. So they are just, whew, you said everything right on point. Thank you, Tyler, for sharing that.
I
It
just
sounds
wanted
like
to add
predatory
something, Tyler.
advertising.
Hold on, there
Sorry,
was
can I
a
just
go ahead,
sorry, can
Pat.
I just very quickly put that in? Tyler, from what you were saying, the individual, the creator, the content maker are really steps behind, several steps, maybe dozens of steps behind the platforms and the algorithm people. How long do you think it'll take, if ever, that these individuals will be able to catch up and secure the proper rights to their intellectual property, their creations, whatever it is, and to get the benefit from it? Nicholas is always going on about sovereign identity and so on. I mean, realistically, getting that across the whole of the world and used as normal is going to take quite a long time. So is there ever going to be a point where anybody will be able to stand up against people like platforms like Facebook and so on?
Great question. Great question.
Wait, you're also conflating though intellectual property and owning your audience. So the people they do own their content that they've posted to these platforms. They don't own the audience.
No, they don't own the audience, but the content. I question whether you own the content too, because if it's freely available on the
You own it. You've
You
granted a
don't.
license.
You
Yes, you do.
generally own
No,
something
you
that you've
do.
made, but
You,
it can be
Billy, you own it.
re.
Let me get into
Wait,
it. You own it. No, you
I,
own it. You grant them
I'm
a license
what
when
I'm
you
saying
post
is
it.
people can repost it, right? And that's technically a digital. Like you didn't give them permission yet. They have
No,
to,
you did.
right?
Yes, you did. Let me back that out.
And
So
all right,
Facebook's
cool.
terms of service, you own it. You give Facebook a license when you post it. You give them a very broad license, and they have that license to grant to other people. So that's just the terms of service. Again,
Okay,
call
what's
it
the
dark
same?
practices, but that's the way the legalese runs there.
All right, and the same thing with tweets, right? You don't necessarily own your tweets, but they are your thoughts, and they do target ads
No, you
towards
can.
the
It's
things that you tweet.
licensing. You can own it. Ownership doesn't mean you're the only person that can use it. You've granted a license to the platform. The platform, through its terms of service, has granted other users the rights to retweet, etc. So there's ownership and there's licenses, and that's how that flows.
And if we want to take advantage of the financial aspects of these platforms, we have to have a more secure way and a clear way as to when we decide not to grant the platforms like Facebook the license to do that and actually keep our authentic own original authority. Is that right?
There is no option, right? Because even I didn't know, excuse me, I didn't know this until today, but I have a business account on Instagram and I didn't know my private number and my private email were attached. So I would get all of these spam messages and I didn't know how people from Twitter or Instagram got those. And it wasn't until today where I found out that, and I'm pretty good with like Instagram and all socials really, and I didn't know that they could actually see what my email is and what my phone number is, and I've been targeted by ads since then. So it's we give permission unknowingly, and even when you're as savvy as probably someone that's a professional, there's certain things when it comes to security and privacy that you kind of just give away without knowing wittingly, right? So, and people actually have to be very, very careful of what they decide to post, because as everyone here knows, once you post on the internet, it's there for life, right? So you give away certain um like just certain creative rights because you've posted it on the internet.
Chip in here, Tyler.
Go ahead, Carl.
I think it was Alexandra who was talking there, absolutely spot on with one addition, that you obviously still own your content. Just for clarification, I'm speaking. I've run a small business on Facebook for my wife, and then a not-for-profit educational charity on there years ago before I got disillusioned with Facebook and through these very issues. So I've got a little bit of experience on this and working with the ad system back then, although I appreciate it's changed a little bit in the intervening years. But the other thing that they have control of, the biggest thing, is the reputation that you have, the history that you have, the story that you create on the platform. And Alexandra, I think it was you sort of referenced this a little bit with your connections to the people. But it's the reviews, it's the rating system, it's the record of successful purchases, it's the feedback, it's all of that stuff that they own as well. So that is that you lose that if you walk away from the platform. And I don't think that's the thing that I think a lot of people getting into business on Facebook and using Facebook business like that don't really appreciate, is that you can't really take that away with you, because it's really the most valuable part of it. And the other thing I want to say is that I feel like I'm probably the only one that thinks that if Facebook actually come out with a viable, from a technology standpoint, a viable API or process for integrating NFTs or selling NFTs, I think it'll be flooded. I think obviously creators and business people have been burned by Facebook before will avoid, but I think we've got more than enough people in the world who very desperately want to get on board this bandwagon, who are creating content. I think places like OpenSea and Rarible are so unbelievably saturated at the moment that a huge amount of people are, Alexandra, you'll know these stories because I've heard people, speak to you in your rooms about them, is that, I've got this fantastic art, I've gone through the process, I've paid these gas fees, maybe I've, paid for them at the wrong time and paid extortionate gas fees, and now my art is just sitting there and nothing's happening. It's because there's just so much. And then platforms like OpenSea, for instance, have already been caught out, manipulating their suggested sales and whatnot, controlling the discovery process, even insider trading. So, there aren't really, even the big platforms have got their current issues. And I just think, given the amount of people who want to get into this space, where better the devil you know, almost. Facebook is a known entity and its evils are well known, and you kind of, ironically, it's become such a mainstay in people's lives that although everybody might hate it, there's also a certain level of, you're horrible, but I know you, and you've got this thing where I can potentially make money, so why not give it a try? So I genuinely think it'll be flooded if they open it. They're the largest marketplace in the world, and that has to mean something.
I agree. However, there is something we need to learn from history. In the 50s and 60s, when young musicians and pop music was starting to really come into its own, it was so unfortunate that so many artists had their contracts with the record companies completely diminished to hardly anything, and so many ended up with no money at all, even with all the talent in the world. And if you didn't look after your intellectual property, i.e. the songs and things, you really got done. And it's unfortunate we don't ever learn from these things, or people aren't more generous when they get up the ladder and look after junior artists, new people coming on board. What is it about human beings that we have to be like that? It's just so downright cruel and unfair.
I would just add one thing to everything everyone has been saying, because I've had the same experience with Facebook. I do marketing and I do it for companies. I have my own influencer account, and I have many influencer friends who've also had similar experiences. So yes, Facebook over the years has switched to more and more monetization for themselves, and they have limited the reach. But on the other hand, joining Facebook or joining TikTok or joining a big centralized platform, which does attract the mass market, like so many people onto it, what you get from that, the benefit is that you can much more, cheaply and effectively attract the kind of people you want, because together with those people, it's algorithms. Okay, maybe you do need to pay for that, but on the one hand, you do have some discovery, which is for free. And on the other hand, you can pay for like really amazingly targeted advertising where you are reaching with your message exactly the kind of people who wish to buy your products or your services or who wish to watch your videos. I mean, some people are on these platforms just for fun and just for, connecting with other people. But if you're an influencer or if you're a business on one of these platforms, why not share, profit share with that platform, since it is doing a ton of work to attract those people and to keep them happy so that they are spending all their time there. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if you are a business, it's kind of on you to migrate those people. If you get reviews on Facebook, you can always invite the people who have given you those reviews to your own website, to your own media, right? To things that you actually do have control over. And that is like a big part of what marketing is all about. It is about collecting, those emails, those phone numbers, first party data, bringing people onto your website, and leveraging big centralized social platforms is just like a really good way of reaching large amounts of people who are specifically interested in your type of content. So just wanted to add that perspective too.
I do
Correct. There are
believe the
benefits and
separation.
detriments to everything, you guys. Can I just really quickly? There's benefits and detriments, so you need to understand the platforms. And those were excellent points. So benefits and detriments, understand what you're giving and what you're getting, read the terms of service, understand that you don't own the relationship to those users. You don't own your Stripe account. That's Facebook's Stripe account. You need to diversify your reach. So you diversify on platforms unless you have an exclusivity agreement with them. Some of them do. Diversify and then get that direct contact. Again, get it through your own website, newsletters, emails, and that's what you want to build. We've gone over this in a lot of rooms, but those are excellent points.
Yeah, this is Dr. Connor. I just feel, just from listening to everybody, and obviously over the last year or two, with all that's going, well, more than 2 years now, with all that's going on with Facebook and a lot of its negative stuff, I think there was a point made earlier on with regard to we've all grown up with Facebook as such as our mainstay. And like, look, there's 300-400 people in this room, and always an excellent room. But, ordinary people, our age group that, just use Facebook as a go-to social media site, are very well aware of what's going on and the dark secrets of it all. And I just think that, even going back to the branding, the meta branding, I think a lot of people will see that again as a negative. I mean, if they were to own up to what they were doing and stuff like that, it would be much, much better. Psychologically, I agree. Like, a lot of younger people are going to just go onto different platforms, other than the fantastic, well, in many ways, fantastic um, ability to market on it and to be able to find people and all of that. I can see so many other platforms taking the reins and going forward. So yeah, just wanted to pop that one in. The Golden Dr. Connor.
Okay. So the next tweet to get into is BB found this one that a Google Pixel Watch could arrive in May. Can it challenge the Apple Watch? And I just tweeted it out so that you can see this rendering of this image. I gotta say, it's really a beautiful. It looks like an Apple Watch but round instead of square. And I gotta say, it's a very beautiful rendering here. A new claim from leaker named John Prosser asserts that the Pixel Watch will arrive May 26th, which he indicates is the first time a specific date has been set for the wearable. Okay, next up, thank you for that one, BB. The next one's from Cal Patel from Bloomberg. The headline says, China's little giants are its latest weapon in the U.S. tech war. The startup program is key to the Communist Party's tech strategy. And what are they talking about? Well, looking at this Bloomberg article, as I am, I just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account, TNATW. It's all about robots, is what it's all about. And it's it says in today's China, behemoths like Alibaba and Tencent are out of favor, but little giants are on the rise. ostensibly Forward X mobile robots are the highlighted company in this example, and it's all about these robots that are moving things all around factories and whatnot. Beijing is giving special government support to thousands of startups working on strategically important sectors, and indeed, robots fit with that very perfectly. So, thank you for that one, CalTel, as a reminder that China's sees that huge opportunity. The next one turns to Russia and Ukraine from Glenn Mitchell, who usually joins us in the Clubhouse audience, and it says that the next war fought between Russia and Ukraine will be fought over water scarcity, which makes sense if you understand what's happening, for example, in Crimea, where when Russia took over Crimea, Ukraine retreated. Crimea, as most non-Americans know, is tethered to Ukraine by a series of bridges. It's barely connected to Ukraine. And as such, it's sort of an island, technically. And it has a series of little bridges that connect it to mainland Ukraine. And that's how the water gets to Crimea. And so Ukraine, those clever Ukrainians, they cut off the water pipeline to Crimea and said to the Russians, have fun without any showers or toilets, because we're turning off the civic water to Crimea. Now that you've taken it over, now the water's your problem. By the way, Crimea doesn't get any water naturally. So have fun with your newly conquered Crimea. And good luck taking any showers or using any toilets. That's what happened. And so now you understand how Putin, this is one of the key issues that's unraveling as we speak, as in recent hours, countries around the world are now demanding that their citizens leave the Ukraine. And indeed, even native Ukrainians who can afford to do so are now leaving, because the friction is getting very intense indeed there between Ukraine and Russia. And by the way, the American intelligence community is now on the record as saying that Russia plans to attack Kiev directly, which was different than previously thought, as they assumed it was going to kind of be a land slog over the border, on the east side of Ukraine. And now, for whatever reason, the American intelligence community is publicly warning that Russia's going to go straight for the capital.
Tyler, it wasn't the American community. Today they discussed it in Parliament, the issue with Ukraine. Okay. But the Ukrainians are saying that we are making it more sensitive because the thing hasn't changed in the last 2 months. The Russians have been on their borders. So I don't know what's your take on that.
I'll defer to Piotr on that, but I know Ellie wanted to jump in first. Go ahead, Ellie.
So somebody on Ian Masters' show, Background Briefing, a Russian, I believe, political scientist, made the point that one of the concerns that Russia has is that the factory that they are depending on for jet engines is in the Kiev Oblast. And they have not been able to make reliable jet engines, according to this person themselves, and that's on their mind. That was just.
We're having trouble hearing you, Ellie.
Oh, so it was just that the factory that they are depending on for jet engines is in the region that Kiev is in, and they have not been able to make reliable jet engines, according to this political.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't have much knowledge, honestly, of the.
Did you want me to comment on something?
Absolutely, yeah.
What was the question?
Any latest info on Ukraine situation?
Oh well, there's something changing every hour. So I'm Piotr. I'm in the blue shirt. But yeah, I mean the Ukrainian situation. Look, I think the commitment of Ukraine, the UK has said it will boost NATO troops to Ukraine if it's invaded. Obviously, the Americans have said they will send potentially, or at least put 8,500 troops on high alert, ready to deploy them at short notice. And the UK and its allies will respond with swift and in unison economic sanctions. The narrative by the West, particularly in Europe, is beginning to get more and more aggressive. We're seeing words like ferocious and absolute, just absolutely heavy-handedness sort of in the rhetoric. So, the UK, for example, already leads a battle group in Estonia of about 1,000 troops, and generally it's this sort of build-up of NATO troops that drives Russia's angst. So it's sort of it's a downward spiral at this point. Russia keeps saying, "Well, we have a right to build presence on our thing, in our land," and then the West is like, "Well, you're going to invade Ukraine, so we're going to increase our defensive measures there," and then that obviously exacerbates the situation with the Kremlin, and so they then build up their defenses more, and it's just a tit for tat at this point. I'm not entirely sure whether the UK, the Russians are going to invade Crimea. The military exercises in Belarus, I feel, might be a bit of a distraction to take away from the main area, the main front, which is going to be the southeastern flank of Ukraine, because, as we've just touched upon, that's where there is a water issue now. But it's also just because where most ethnic Russians and Russian sort of Ukrainians are more existent. The further east you go, the more Russian orientated Ukraine becomes. That being said, most Ukrainians obviously still favor more of a pro-EU stance. But I do think that if you were to see some kind of scenario of a minor campaign, it would start in Donbass, go along the southern border of Ukraine, along the coastline, and all the way down to Moldova, because there's this area called Transnistria, which we've discussed here, I think, briefly, which is essentially a separatist region of Moldova, much like South Ossetia in Georgia in 2008. So there are sort of some analysts who are sort of saying, could we see a second Georgia of that sort of extent, and also because if that was the route that was taken along the southern border, you could see the Sevastopol fleet engaged, which would support the process, and because there lacks really any naval competition in the Black Sea, it's Russia's backyard. Russia would have an easy time of supporting its ground troops if they got bogged down by Ukrainian defense. So that for me makes the most sense. If you were to see a higher version of a campaign, there are multiple different scenarios to this. You could see Russia try and take the entirety of Ukraine. I just doubt it. Because it's too costly, and I mean, unless they come to some agreement of installing a puppet government or something. But at this stage, I still don't think Putin has fully made up his mind. If he had, it wouldn't be taking this long. But yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about it. In terms of actual perspective from Ukrainians and Russians, I mean, many Ukrainians, I think, are in denial in what's going on. Some still think that it's not going to happen. I was talking to a couple of friends in Kiev, and they said that they're more concerned by economic and energy prices than they are by the war. So it varies quite a lot. But thanks a lot.
There's one relevant new development since we met last time. So in the past 24 hours, a hacktivist claim ransomware strike on Belarus railway intended to disrupt Russian forces. In an apparent bid to stop a Russian arms buildup near the Ukrainian border, a pro-democracy hacktivist group claims to have hacked a Belarusian railway system, allegedly one of the conduits for tanks and weaponry into the region. The incident comes as Russian and NATO allied forces continue to spar over the political future of Ukraine. Belarus, which sits on the north of Ukraine, is considered a key Kremlin ally in the ongoing conflict and has seen an accumulation of Russian soldiers and weaponry as the two nations prepare for a upcoming joint military exercise. In a post to its Telegram page on Monday, the hacktivist group known as Cyber Partisans claimed to have struck the nation's railway system, apparently spiking it with ransomware as a way to deter further transfers of arms The hackers also published images of what they said were files compromised in the attack and demanded the release of numerous political prisoners, which they said had been illegitimately incarcerated by the government. Quote, the government continues to suppress the free will of the Belarusians, imprison innocent people. They continue to unlawfully keep thousands of political prisoners, the hackers said to Ars Technica. They also decried the government for allowing occupying troops into their land, ostensibly a reference to Russia. So
transportation is
Tyler,
now fair game for cyber attacks.
Yeah, it is. And also yesterday's Cyber News said, yes, that they claim this, but to be careful, they still don't know, that doesn't necessarily mean their intentions or the actual group that did it. I mean, Russia could do it just to confuse things. So they just said that, yes, that's who they claim to be, but they don't know that yet.
Well,
Or their
And
intentions.
it seemed that what they were asking for was release of prisoners.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it seemed they had a dual motive, which was they seem to have caused some burden or friction in hindering the movement of troops to Ukraine, and in locking down the computers, they're asking for something in return, which is
I wonder how many subway systems in major cities worldwide were designed with security precautions when they were created in the 1980s, and they haven't had their update software happen since then. So Windows ME in the background.
Oh, come on. Those are all solid like Fort Knox. Those are absolutely the finest grade security systems in the world, it's the transportation system.
Yeah, if they're anything like the U.S., Fort Knox, all of zero. There's transportation is some of the worst. Airlines, rails, everything.
It'll be fine, everybody. We're all going to be fine. It'll all go smoothly.
Hey, Tyler, or anyone up here on stage, does anyone have access to Palantir software or know someone with access to Palantir software? Because the reason I bring it up would be very interesting to double check and verify through real-time satellite imagery.
Oh, right. Great point. So,
and I say that because back in, I think it was 2014, 2015, in a similar situation when we saw this geopolitical tension rise, when Russia was saying, oh, we sent in a bunch of tanks into Ukraine, if anyone recalls that time period, I was flying into Kazakhstan for a wedding, and I had a layover in Kyiv, so I was flying over Ukraine. My eyes were glued to the airplane window seat, and I didn't see a tank in sight. So,
Well,
again,
they wouldn't be doing their camouflage duty if they were. You might try
just
Planet
my 2
Labs.
cents.
Planet
neon pink
Labs has
tanks?
daily
Yeah.
imagery, and it wouldn't do like in motion stuff, but you might get like a train yard or two with things. You kind of compare it for certain regions. There are some Wall Street trading firms that pay some money to. If you check like the oil levels, I think it was for certain reservoirs. They also do things like Walmart parking lots, and they say, okay, we can use this as a metric, and you monitor like 1,000 Walmart parking lots around the country, around the world, and you say, now we have an idea of how many people are actually shopping at the place, and they use it for hedge fund trading. But what's interesting is those same data servers are starting to basically provide other services as more satellite data comes on, especially not just a high spatial resolution or color spectrum, but temporal resolution, just getting way more imagery at a way more common, often basis from the same sites and angles. So I would be very surprised if they weren't already basically having some sort of package they can actually use for that sort of monitoring. But I'd say look up Planet Labs and look up oil reservoir monitoring and Walmart parking lots hedge fund. If you type in those search terms, you'll get all sorts of great stuff.
Okay, and Jennifer,
find the Ukraine and tanks.
Jennifer, you made reference to the possibility of a disinformation campaign that Russia might be doing, that this whole hack thing might be intentional disinformation. That's a good segue to the next article from Jeff G. from the Taipei Times out of Taiwan, that the People's Republic of China targets Taiwan with new disinformation campaign. Chinese content farms use hundreds of fake accounts to reach every corner of society. An official at the Investigation Bureau said China is conducting disinformation campaigns that involve more than 400 fake accounts targeting Taiwanese on social media. The Investigation Bureau said on Friday, China's trying to infiltrate social media. What? Hold on. This is kind
Didn't
of
we
great.
find out that the majority of anti-vaxxer campaign stuff comes like 3/4 of the content comes from like 7 or 12 people or something ridiculous like that? So the amount of bang for buck that you get on these things is insane. So why wouldn't you?
Internet.
The amount is ridiculous. Just 400? Yeah.
Internet forums and online chat rooms that are popular among Taiwanese to subvert the public's trust in the government. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. They're trying to subvert the public trust in the government, y'all. Oh my goodness. Destabilize society and meddle in elections. Oh my God. The Bureau said in Taiwan. Wait a
You know,
minute.
just for fun, if anyone wants to grab this with things, World Economic Forum, let's say, was it like 2006, 2007, when Google and YouTube were official sponsors of the event, and they were actually legitimately in good faith. Well, you think at the time making the argument that the internet is good for society, and Google can basically be someone you can trust in the future for political engagement. It's really funny to contrast that with essentially, it's like, oh shit, let's see how far we've come. Just 10 years. It's amazing how fast people's opinion changes.
Here's the quote. These accounts are specializing in posting fake news and disinformation to undermine the COVID-19 measures implemented by Taiwan's health authorities, create confusion, and circulate politically charged messages to generate disputes and conflicts. These
But
are clearly
sorry.
products of China's content farms.
Tyler, it's a bit embarrassing. We Taiwanese said ourselves, but to be honest, our government, the parties themselves hired this kind of online account to influence some policies as well. So just that's what I said. Just 400 of a CCP's account. That's far less than the accounts we face for the misinformation every day. So yeah, but I think we get used to it much more than maybe other citizens of other countries because like every day we were maybe that's how we have this critical thinking and step to think for a while to think if this information is true or not. Yeah, but I think this news appeared because the five flight on the flight the there are like 30 something flights over the seas yesterday, so that's why this news appear.
Okay.
So regarding trusting the Taiwanese government versus say what other governments are doing, all you have to do is Google COVID in Taiwan and scroll down to the graph and then compare that to nearly any other country, right, other than China or Western Australia, which is a state of Australia, not a country. And that really recommends that the Taiwanese government is doing a much better job than most on this point.
So the next article, also from Jeff G, says that Apple deletes all traces of its controversial scanning plans. Apple's controversial plan to scan all iCloud libraries for child abuse like images, fingerprinting, whatever, and apparently Apple has deleted all traces of this after a very
Lesson
considerable...
learned, if you want to do something controversial, just go ahead and just do it. Why tell people about it?
Exactly right. Next is from BB that TikTok secretly paid influencers to boost content in Japan. The Japanese operator has admitted it posted videos on Twitter without informing the audience about the sponsored content that might have violated industry guidelines against stealth marketing in Japan.
Gasp.
That's coming
I
from...
think that shows it's possible TikTok hired all influencers of the world, but the Japan just pinned it out.
Okay. Next one is from Messi, that via Reuters that 3 separate U.S. states and D.C. are suing Google over location tracking. Texas, Indiana, Washington State, and the District of Columbia sued Google on Monday over what they called deceptive location tracking, and that old gag has been going on for...
I can expect some
very long
record fines of work out to 0.001% of weekly revenue. It's going to be amazing.
in the bloodbath.
Right, parking ticket.
Yeah. And Katerina shares the next one, speaking of blood, that blood proteins could be the key to a long and healthy life. Researchers have identified 2 blood proteins that influence health and longevity. Developing drugs to target these proteins could help slow the aging process. There we go. Let's hope so. The next one is from Ken, and many others sent this one in. That's Neil Young, one of the best to ever do it, by the way. You young kids out there who's listening to all them TikTok songs need to go get yourself a copy of Harvest Moon, by the way. And Neil is an absolute legend, and that's not even my opinion, although he is in my top personal 5, maybe top personal 3. But even Paul McCartney would agree that Neil is about as good as it gets. Neil Young is asking Spotify to remove his music over the current brouhaha about a Joe Rogan podcast where he had a guest that led to many medical professionals signing a letter suggesting that Spotify should include a warning at the beginning of the episode about the vaccine misinformation that was contained in that episode from that guest of Joe Rogan's. And so Neil Young has jumped into the fire, as he has done historically in moments like this, although young folks have no idea who Neil Young is, and that's a real tragedy in and of itself. But this is not Neil's first time of jumping into an issue like this, historically, although it's been a while. And so Neil Young is demanding Spotify remove his music because he doesn't want to be on the same platform that promotes what happened with this Joe Rogan episode. And quote, it's saying they can have Joe Rogan or they can have Rogan or Young. Neil Young wrote in the letter asking Spotify to remove all of his music from the service, not both. So you can have Rogan or Young, not both.
Well, the
Hey
thing is, they
Tyler,
already spent the
can
money on
can,
Rogan.
can, can I at least comment on my own thing? Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to give a attribution for doing that tweet to somebody else because actually I was in an earlier newsroom of the new news, and Dr. Francine was the first one who actually saw that story, and she brought it up in news. And I know that I'm not even sure she's here in the room today, but she was in news, and so I tweeted it out to you, but I actually only knew about the story from her, so I want to give her credit for that. Dr. Francine Hardaway, and she actually made an interesting point. I don't actually get on the platform in news, I just listen, but she did. Dr. Francine made a point which I back challenged, which she probably didn't see because apparently today was her first day using Club Deck. So Tyler, from what you told me before, you don't get to see the Clubhouse back channels if you're using Club Deck instead of your phone. So she probably didn't see my back channel.
Right.
But she had raised the point that Spotify is paid $100 million to,
Right.
to get Joe
For Joe.
Rogan over there,
Right.
and so the question is who's worth more money to them, and unfortunately, but I said to Dr. Francine to a back channel was that they paid $100 million for Joe Rogan. The business decision is going to be to keep Joe Rogan because there's a lot of musicians on Spotify, and so it's assuming that we don't know what the contract is with Neil Young and his music, but assuming he can remove it at his request, then they'll just say fine, go, because we're going to keep Joe Rogan because that's just the correct business decision at this point.
Right. Yeah, no doubt they're going to pick Joe Rogan for the reasons you and Francine said. I don't know the contractual nature of the relationship between Neil and Spotify, but I Neil might have the ability to withdraw. He likely does own his own content. That wouldn't surprise me, although I don't know that to be true for a fact. But his statement implies that he does. Anyways, that's worth looking into as a first order of hygiene and analyzing the details of this particular scenario. Does Neil actually own his own streaming rights, and does he have the ability to withdraw it
No,
from?
that's correct, Tyler. I mean, you would think he would because he's such a big star, but he's also, as you noted, old school. Back when, as Pat noted, the record companies and the labels and the distributors. I mean, that was like a multi-tiered system that was completely onerous, and a lot of the artists gave up the actual ownership or exclusive rights to their content. So it depends. I don't know how Spotify licenses, so it doesn't, but that's an exactly good point. Whether he has the right to do it, regardless, it's a good publicity move. So if he has the right to do it or not, it's like Taylor Swift re-recording her song and releasing it and just kind of going, fuck you, even though it was in violation of her actual contracts. But again, publicity and community are proving to be viable options or pressures. So it's a good point. And also, we don't know the terms. We know that they bought Joe Rogan for $100 million. We don't know what would happen. I'm sure there's cancellation provisions in there that if they cancel him for something that he's allowed to do, they might have another big penalty there. So it's all going to come down to business, but business does include public perspective. And as you said, it's more likely they'll keep Joe Rogan regardless.
Right. So to be continued. I think we'll get a little more detail. We'll shake out of that story in the next 24 hours. And the next one's about from Valerie, who listens in the audience most times. Once in a while, jumps on stage. That SAT exams will move from paper and pencil to digital format, saying the shift will boost its relevancy as more colleges make standardized tests optional for admission. And she says another brick in the wall, digitizing higher education for U.S. universities, so you still have to go to the testing site on your laptop. Okay. And then the next article is also from Valerie, that the Winter Olympics have gone robotic ice cream. So there's a Beijing robotic ice cream server and a bartender. We can add those to the list of attractions for people being greeted in Beijing. And
they also have like a crane that will serve your meal directly to your table. So there are all sorts of robots there in the Olympics.
Alrighty. The next one's from Katarina from the Wall Street Journal. The title is How a Small Town Learned to Stop Worrying and Start Loving Amazon. In Darlington, England, shopkeepers rue e-commerce, but the town has embraced new jobs by an Amazon warehouse. So this Wall Street Journal writing a love letter for Amazon. The next, also from Katarina, is that Taco Bell is launching a business school to teach employees what it takes to be a franchise owner. The idea of Taco Bell Business School is to teach higher level employees the key skills needed to operate a restaurant as a franchisee.
Tyler, that's actually a good thing. I mean, I'm not going to say specifically to Taco Bell whether it's good or bad, but a lot of these companies are starting to offer alternative paths to four-year college, which is actually really seen as a good thing. It's more accessible for people, and if they're taking their own employees and up-leveling them, that's a good thing. So, interesting.
Jennifer, here's the more interesting question. Elon Musk has made a very good point that we have a system that you can borrow, $100,000 to go to college, but you can't borrow $100,000 to start a business. So the issue would be if somebody wanted, a young person wanted to start, get into franchising, particularly like a Taco Bell level, that requires like a lot of money, but they can't get a government supported loan to do that. But they can only get a government supported loan to go to college and then not get a job when they graduate. So,
Yeah, I wonder if Taco Bell will, start offering loans for this because, again, they're going to end up getting a lot of revenue from that. But good points.
The next one's from The Verge. What happens when life insurance companies track fitness data? Wow, The Verge is finally catching up to one of our core conversation points over the past many months about health insurance, life insurance, health coverage generally in the age of personal data and devices, and it's coming in a very big way, and it's great to see The Verge jumping into that art, something we talk about very regularly. Jay, you got your mic on, Jay?
Nope.
Okay. Nope. Okay. So the next one is, and last but not least for today, the reason so many people are obsessed with this new game Wordle is the headline. And the answer is because it's genius. That's Josh Wardle, a software engineer, knew his partner loved word games, so he created one, according to the New York Times. I wanted to come up with a game that she would enjoy. And anyway, the article says there's a reason so many people are obsessed with Wordle. And it says, according to this article, that word games are oozing with reasons for people to love them. They're quick and relatively easy to play. And here's a quote. I think people kind of appreciate that there's this thing online that's just fun. It's not trying to do anything shady with your data or your eyeballs. The one catch, you can only play Wordle once a day. A cruel yet genius choice. That likely plays a large part in why people can't wait to play the game every day. The anticipation is real as ever, as is the desire to guess the word in fewer tries than you did before. And indeed, I played Wordle for the first time myself today, and I got it in 3 tries. Thank you very much. And looking forward to tomorrow. Indeed, it's quite brilliant in its simplicity, and I love the creator's point that there is a sort of beauty in the knowledge that there's nothing to do about data or anything like that. So that's it for today. Thank you to everybody for helping us do it, and we'll do it again tomorrow. And we started 30 minutes early today. We will continue to do that as it affords me to go to sleep 30 minutes early and wake up 30 minutes early, which I need to start doing. And